2009, spelunker John Jones was caving with some friends and family in the Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. About an hour into the expedition, John decided to find the route known as the Birth Canal, a narrow passage that spelunkers must crawl through carefully if they dare. After finding what he thought was the birth canal, he crawled in head first and started inching his way forward. But John would soon realize that this wasn't the birth canal, since it was way tighter than anything safe to crawl through. By this point, John didn't even have enough room to wiggle out the way he came, so his only option was to push forward. Over the next 27 hours, hundreds of rescuers failed to pull John out of the crevice. At some point, John died from cardiac arrest and his body was never retrieved. The Nutty Putty Cave has since been sealed off.
I do not think was an accident.
Facts, Part 53. Frankie Muniz has had 9 concussions throughout his life and now suffers from severe memory loss. His condition is so bad that he doesn't even remember being on the TV show Malcolm in the Middle. According to ancient beliefs, birthmarks show how you were killed in your past life. A man named Michael Paul was on his way home from church when he decided to casually crack his neck like any other time. But afterwards, he suddenly started sweating profusely and then went pale. By the time Paul could receive medical care, he had already slipped into a coma. Soon afterwards, Michael Paul had died from cracking his neck.
Scary Things You Say Part 23. My son said to me, "Remember when I was Uncle Maury?" That was my brother. His name was Maury. He died when he was 33 and my son was born 5 years later. When I was little, over a year old, my mom was walking down the stairs. I told her, "Be careful, Mommy. That's how my husband died." What the heck? Babies know everything. I was 5. I found it out because my little brother talked to me but no one believes me. He said, "I know your pain." I was screaming. My son was 3.5 years when he told me how much I was crying for a baby. He'd say, "God told me to wait because it wasn't my time." This is so I find it fascinating actually, not scary. Mine asks why the little boy that lives with us is always sad. I had a miscarriage prior to having him. Oh, this is so sad. My 6-year-old niece once asked, "Where were we before we were here?"
Morbid Facts, Part 68. This is the grave of Jesse Presley, Elvis Presley's twin brother who was stillborn. Elvis would often open up to friends and family about his unborn brother, telling them that he always had a persistent feeling that Jesse was somehow with him throughout his life. In the 1800s, you could pay your admission to the London Zoo by bringing in a pet cat or dog to feed the lions. This is a photo of an Australian model being distracted by the first plane that hit the World Trade Center on 9/11. She and many others thought the blast was just an accident until the second plane hit. In 2015, a dying fisherman told his two buddies to use his ashes as bait mix. 3 weeks after he died, his friends used his ashes to reel in this 180-pound monster carp. It was one of the largest carps ever caught.
This old lady killed so many people. Baba Anushka, she loved chemistry. And when her husband died, she was like, I'm gonna make the house into a laboratory and sell potions. So a bunch of girls came to her and they were like, we don't want our husbands to go to war. And she was like, I can make them really, really sick so they don't have to. And they were like, yeah, do that. So she started getting really, really popular. But then all the girls were like, we actually don't like our husbands. Can you do a little more? And Baba Anushka was like, yeah, I can kill them. So then all the girls were like, oh, we like this. So Baba Anushka made these deadly potions, gave them to the girls gave them to their abusive husbands, and they were dead in like 8 days. And Baba Anushka would do this thing where she'd ask the girls, how heavy is the problem? Which was code for, how heavy is your husband? Because I gotta make sure I put enough in it, mama. She was so successful that she hired a sales agent to go into town and like sniff out people with marital problems. But this one girl fucked it all up. After she killed her shitty husband, she used another potion to kill her new husband's rich uncle. And the police were like, can you explain this? And she was like, it was Baba Anushka. Baba Anushka was like, are you fucking kidding me? But she ended up getting out of jail and then living to 100.
Ghost stories from around the world. Malaysia, the Penanggal. Once there was a young girl who was bullied by a lot of people in her village. People would often say really mean and terrible things to her, like she had a face that only her mother would love. And that made her bitter and angry, especially towards married or pregnant women. One day when the bullying was especially bad, she finally broke down and went on a rampage, which resulted in the deaths of many pregnant women in her village. She was then obviously caught and brought to justice. The villagers and the families of the victims hung her by a really tall tree, then used a different piece of rope and tied her legs together, then tied the other end of the rope to a bull. When the bull was let go, her body was pulled out, leaving her head and her organs dangling from the tree. And that's how she became a vengeful spirit, who floats around at night trying to find a pregnant woman to be her victim.
Trigger warning, this video contains stalking and graphic violence. It had been 8 months and I hadn't heard anything. I was living my best life and I had a boyfriend, my very first. I went over to his house to meet his parents, and on that night I got a text message that said if I didn't leave things would get bad, with the signature always watching. They had a cat that they let roam around outside. Later in the afternoon it was time for my boyfriend's mom to take me home. As we were leaving, when we opened the door, his cat was on the front porch, gutted, with a note that said, always watching, written in something red and sticky. Immediately we called the police. A report was made, my phone was finally taken into evidence, and the note was taken into evidence. They obviously let us keep the cat to bury it, and nothing was done. A few months later I got my phone back and they said that the numbers were fake and somebody was using a computer to change their location, and that there was nothing that they could do. In part 4, things will be very graphic and very violent, so I might take a while to do it, so please be patient with me.
This is why when something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Once a newly married couple was searching for houses they could buy, and they came across a beautiful house with a suspiciously cheap price. They couldn't see anything wrong with the house, so they just thought they got lucky. They moved in quickly. But one day the husband was walking down the hallway when he found a red crayon on the floor. He thought maybe the previous residents had left it behind, so he just threw it out. The next day he found another red crayon lying in the exact same place. This time he asked his wife about it. His wife looked shocked. She confessed that every day since they've moved in, she's been finding red crayons in the hallway too. Then the husband tried to tap on the wall at the end of the hallway and heard a hollow sound. He began peeling off the wallpaper and found a sliding door behind it. It was as if someone had tried everything they could to keep anyone from finding this door. He tried to open it, but the door was nailed shut. Then he took a hammer and pried off the nails one by one. He opened the door to find a small room with words scribbled in red crayon all over the walls. It said, "Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out," over and over.